All right, welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. I have Chief Ryan from Leland Grove PD in Illinois. He has 29 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Ryan. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm so excited. I wanted to give you a shout out. So, you are the first vice president for the Illinois Chief of Police, and next year you're going to be the president for Illinois Chief of Police.
That is correct. It's a statewide organization. We've got 1,400 members, and it's just a statewide association for the advocacy for the professional voice of law enforcement.
And I know that wellness is something that is a priority to you, and that's something that you're focusing on. I wanted to, before we dive into the wellness piece of things, maybe give a little bit of background on you. How did you get started in law enforcement? What did this 29 years look like in like a short little snapshot?
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of like I fell into law enforcement, not necessarily by accident, but it's almost as if I was expected to be a police officer. My father was a police officer. His uncle was elected sheriff. I grew up around law enforcement officers, and it's just one of those things that you gravitated towards. And I started taking eligibility tests in '94. Wasn't until '96 when I was actually hired somewhere. And next thing you know, here we are 29 years later, like you pointed out. So
Does it feel like it's been 29 years, or do you feel like that went by really fast?
absolutely not. I can still remember one of my first calls for service. Of course, it turned out that it was a double homicide, right? So obviously you're going to remember that. But I mean, you can remember every single second of that call, and then what happened the next few days, and then you remember little bits and pieces from a year later. Or it doesn't seem like 29 years. And when you say I've been a cop for 29 years, it's almost depressing because I'm 52. So that's more than half my life if my math is right, right? And it's like, where's all this time gone? And the interesting part is I'm not even interested in retiring yet. If I can't do the job, then I'll retire. But I still come to work every day early. I still like my job. I'm still supported by our officers and my agency and my city councils. I enjoy coming to work every day. So there's not a single day that I dread coming. If that happens, then that's a whole nother story.
I think that that all has to do with wellness. And I think that that is the goal for everyone, that you still like the job, that you can be in this career for a long time and still feel good physically, mentally, so that you want to do the job. And it's really interesting that you said it's like almost like weird that you said that about being half your life, because I was literally at the gym yesterday and they had like throwback music on where I was listening to songs from like my youth, like high school time, and I was thinking about all these things as I'm working out, and I was like, wow, I had that exact same thought. I was like, wow, my life is half over. And I was like, in one way it feels like it went by so fast, and then another way like that feels like it was so long ago. And I had that exact thought yesterday where I was like, I'm kind of sad, but like I'm also not. Like it's such a weird feeling to almost think of like your mortality in a way, and like how quickly time goes by. And I think that wellness comes into play as you get older too, because you're like, wow, okay, like if I want to make it another 30, 35 years, like I really need to make sure that like I keep prioritizing me and feeling well so that I can make it there. But yeah, I had that same thought. It was a very eerie, weird thing to recognize.
Because when you think half your life, I don't feel ready to die. I don't feel old, but I mean, obviously I am old, but I don't feel old like that. So when you think how much time has passed, where in the heck is 29 years gone?
Oh, I know. I tell everyone now today, I'm like, I'm young-ish. I'm not young, but I'm not old.
Right.
Youngish. So I think you and I, we can use that. We're youngish. I know that over the years, obviously wellness has looked very different from when you started in law enforcement to now. And you shared with me that in 2020, the state of Illinois came out with a new curriculum for your new recruits. And this includes various aspects of wellness. I was hoping you could explain what that looks like. What have you guys started integrating at an academy level?
So, one of the nice things about the Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board is that they actually looked at officer wellness and made it a priority. And literally, when you go to the academy today, the very first module you have, the very first day, the stuff that you work on, it's called Officer Wellness Labs. All right. And in what I'm going to read something just so you get all of it, but it says the module is designed to meet the basic requirements set forth by the Training Standards Board for police training curriculum learning mode. It says this unit focuses on ways that law enforcement officers can maintain optimal wellness, physical and emotional, throughout their careers. This is in the interest of the job performance, but also introducing the recruits to strategies for preserving their personal well-being during and beyond the course of their jobs. Um, Shift work is tough, and it takes a tough. It affects people in many different ways, but it takes a toll on your mental health, but also your physical health. And then the other problem is not that police or law enforcement are specific to this, but we don't have your routine meals where you sit down. You don't have a set time to eat. Our dinners will get interrupted, much as everybody's, but we're a lot of times eating out of the front seat of our squad car because we just pulled through a drive-through, right? And you're eating the burgers and nothing that's really good for you. And that was always how it had been in the past. Now, fortunately, in 2020, the Training Standards Boards took note of this and said we need to change that, and society, we need to change that. So they've pointed out to us as the law enforcement leaders how important it is, and that actually is so true because you don't realize, year after year after year of bad eating habits, how that affects you, from your emotional status to your actual physical status. So it takes a complete toll. This here points out to them at the very start of their career, hey, this is why it's important and this is what you need to do.
And I love that approach because it's taking more of the front seat instead of the back seat, right? We're taking more of that proactive measures and steps versus being reactive, which I think historically it sounds like it's always been a little bit more reactive, not as proactive. And so I love that you're at least giving them in the very, very beginning, before they get into this career, saying, hey, here are some of the challenges. Here are some of the things that you are going to experience. It's not like a matter of if, like, you are going to work shift work. You are going to be faced with challenges with nutrition. You are going to be faced with challenges physically because of the weight of your gear, because of sitting for long periods of time. Mentally, you're going to experience things, you're going to see things, you're going to experience traumatic events. You're going to struggle with sleep because shift work is hard. And if you have a family and you're working graves, like there's times where you're going to want to be up during the day on your days off to be with your family. So your sleep schedule is going to be off. So giving them like, hey, like these things are going to happen. And then here are some things that we can do to get in front of it and to, promote a long career and set you off on the right path. Because it, I say this all the time, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, but like it's so much harder to backtrack than it is just to start well, because to unlearn unhealthy habits is harder than just to build healthy habits in the first place.
But to unlearn them is almost not, it's not impossible, it's extremely tough. And at this here, pointing out the very front, then maybe you don't have those. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, it takes a bad event to make them refocus. In the past, I've seen. It seems like in the past I've seen a couple different type of police officers on the physical side. The guys that hit the gym every day, and I don't want to say are vain, but the ones that are really working out so that they can have the big muscles and look good in uniform type of stuff.
Mhm.
Right? And you have all the other ones that just barely work out if they do. All right, until something happens, until they have a heart attack, or until they go to the doctor and they say, well, your cholesterol is out of control. You need to, it gets to the point where they don't focus on them because it's never been a priority because nobody's told them what the importance of it is. in today's world, law enforcement recognizes it is of the utmost importance, and so we're telling you up front what you need to be aware of, what to look for.
Yeah. And I love that that's something that is a focus now. Have you seen it? You said 2020 was when this started to be implemented at an academy level. So it's been about 5 years.
Right?
Have you seen any direct results to that? Are you seeing any of the younger officers, prioritizing their wellness more or talking about it more? Have you seen a direct result yet? I know things take time, but
The, I don't know that you can completely relate it to that because as a society we've actually changed the focus on. I mean, we are more health conscious as a society. It seems more now, but I do see officers more concerned where they're going to eat and what they're actually consuming, as opposed to let's just go get a pizza and some beer. Well, not beer during work, obviously, but
right.
I do see their eating habits seem to be different.
Yeah, well, that's good. And I know you said that usually it takes a bad event, and we know that that's human nature, right? Like where a lot of times we don't deal with a problem until there's a problem. You don't think about injury prevention until there's an injury. And you had shared this concept of a trash can. And, this is in the context of cumulative stress, right? And you had mentioned to me that, as you go through this career, you're adding trash into this trash can. And if you don't take care of that, eventually it'll overflow. Can you share a little bit about not only your concept of this, but what has your experience been with cumulative stress? Has there been an event that kind of gave you that like aha of like, oh, whoa, I haven't emptied my trash can in a while, and maybe there's some things that I need to start doing to prioritize myself?
Yeah, you give me chills just talking about that, right? And to be fair, this is not my concept. It was a class I'd gone to. Like, there's a nationwide speaker. His name's Kent Williams, Breach Point Consulting, I believe. And I had attended one of his classes, and it was one of the greatest classes I'd gone to. I mean, there's a lot of good training that we have, but this was one, a really good one, and it was on officer health or wellness. And he said that what you told me about the trash can, and it makes sense. The older cops, and I say older because at my department, I'm trying to change the whole idea of this. So I don't want you to stuff your trash can, right? But us old guys, right? It was you dealt with it and moved on. Suck it up, kid, move on, right? You don't talk about it. You didn't cry about it. You just dealt with it and then left, right? But you do that enough times, it's like you can't stuff your can full anymore. Or it's full. So what brought it to light for me, I'd already been to Kent's class. I was on a call. It was just it was a death call, death investigation. Check on the welfare. The lady had passed away, natural causes. She's I don't let's say she was there in their 80s, husband wife. So I'm standing downstairs, waiting for the funeral home to come pick her up, and her husband is up at her bedside. Spending the last time with her. Been married some 60 years, and she's never going to be in that house again. And I'm looking at the walls. There's pictures of families. It's a split faith house. There's a menorah over here and a Christmas tree over there. And just for no reason, I just start crying. I mean, literally just tears falling. I did not know these people, nothing about them. It's just for some reason at that point in time, the grief and stress and everything's just overwhelming. Now, it was not me bawling or anything like that, but I'm sitting there standing there crying. I had no clue. And I realize it's because of all the stuff that we don't talk about. So from that point on, I try to talk about as much stuff as I can, and I make sure I tell our new guys, you've got to talk. One of the things that Kent points out, with the older days, we didn't have stressed debriefings or anything. You just move on to the next call. Well, they point out how the fire department does it. You got four guys that sit in a house together, and they all get the call at the same time together. They all gear up and they're listening to each other talk about the call they're getting ready to go on. They get in the rig, they go to handle the call, then they handle the call, then they leave, all go back, and they all go back to the same house, and then they sit and talk about that call. All right. So they've had their whole debriefing team going on. We get a call over the radio, run to such and such a house. This is what you got. You get there, you deal with it for a few minutes, and then when everybody clears, you get back in your car, and then they instantly send you another call. So you don't have that car to car talk time, or you don't have that time to be able to speak about the events of what just happened. And in recent years, there's been a swing to where if you do have major incidents, we'll have a medical or we'll have a stress debriefing um, at a location that includes all the first responders, whether it's fire, EMS, and police. We'll all get together and we'll talk. Now they're bringing in psychologists or psychiatrists. So, I mean, it's just a whole nother level that is stepped up from when we were older. So luckily nowadays it's more acceptable. If you got bothered by a call for service in the old days, the old time cops who would, I'd be the old timer now, right? But the old timers would just make fun of you or ridicule you and tell you stop being a baby type of thing. So it's really changed a lot.
Yeah, and I really love that just the acceptance of it's okay to talk about stuff. And I also think, from a leadership perspective, you giving that message to the people within your organization of like, hey, like it's okay to talk about this stuff. And, it's okay to empty that trash can. And we actually want you to empty that trash can. It's not just okay, like it's encouraged. Like we want that trash can to be as empty as possible so it doesn't overflow. Um,
Right.
I know we talked a little bit about just being able to kind of lead from an example of like, hey, don't make the same, and I'm going to put this in like quotations, but like the same mistakes that
Right.
I did. Maybe learn from the things that, we've gone through. How important do you think that is as a leader to lead from example in a way of honesty and vulnerability and sharing maybe some of the challenges that you've been through so that other people can learn from those things and maybe not follow in those footsteps of some of the things that maybe you didn't do the best.
I think that's huge. I think it's huge. And I'm not just saying that because that's my approach. All right. It might not be everybody's approach. You might want to be the type of leader, the chief or whatever the case is, that looks infallible and everybody looks up to. Is like, I want to be just like him. I want them, when I say them, I want my officers to know they are just like me and I'm not perfect. I've got problems. And if they can learn from my bad examples or my, if you want to call them failures, so they can do that. I'm all for it. I'd rather be able to tell them how I screwed up so that they don't have to have that same problem. I think that type of person is more genuine, more honest. You can't fake it. And so I think that that's more welcoming and you can get a little bit more respect, but it's not about any of those things. It's about honestly making sure that they feel comfortable enough to talk if they need to talk, make sure that they are secure enough to say, if I need help, I'm going to ask. You know,
Yeah.
uh, we have access to a program called We Never Walk Alone. It's a peer support. It's an anonymous peer support program. And you have a small agencies, or most agencies are less than 40 officers.
Right.
So you have small agencies. You really don't have somebody in the department that you can completely confide in because you might try to confide, but they may tell somebody else. Or, John's going to tell Matt, Matt's going to tell Dave, Dave's going to tell Tina, And so police officers don't really want to confide in their own department. All right. So this program called We Never Walk Alone is completely anonymous. They have statewide peer support officers, and you can go online, either do it on text or you can call them on the telephone. And it's a 24/7 program. And we don't know if you're calling. All that we know is that the program's getting used because the program doesn't tell us that, yes, your officer's called. It just says these how many calls that we've got come in the system, the last month type of thing. And people are utilizing the service. I think it's a great, great program.
Yeah. And, it sounds to me like you're trying to create a safe space where people know that it's okay to reach out for those resources. And I agree with you that, when there's a level of vulnerability and openness to things, then it's more relatable. I think that a lot of times, especially when it comes to stigma, if you feel like no one else around you is accepting of these things or talking about these things, then you feel like you can't do those things, and
Right.
so I think that is what feeds into that stigma. But I agree also that you can't fake it and vulnerability has to be honest. And I think there's nothing ickier to me than someone who's like trying to be vulnerable for the sake of like trying to get like I don't know. And I think that you guys do such a good job of sniffing out BS that like if you came in front of everyone and you're like I'm unauthentically trying to be authentic, people
Right.
would mark that so quick and be like wow, like that's
Yeah.
not
No,
it.
you're spot on. They'd be able to catch that in a heartbeat, and then you just lose total respect because like he's trying to fake that. You can't. You have to be honest and true and real,
Yeah.
and that's problematic for the older cops because that's not who we were supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
And it's also tough. I mean, you have to be willing to change as a person in a sense. You said earlier, or we said earlier that how this job changes you. To go from somebody who you're not supposed to talk to anybody to somebody who's saying please talk to somebody, that's a huge jump, and you have to be open to change, and I'm open to change because what we saw obviously wasn't working, right? So let's try something different, and for me personally it's worked. I used to be super closed off, super quiet, wouldn't talk about anything personal or let anybody try to be on the inside or anything. But it's just it doesn't work that well. And so I'm just more open and honest, and that opens them up because, as you said, then my vulnerability will expose theirs and let them feel comfortable to be able to talk.
What advice would you give to someone who maybe has come from the older generation or maybe someone who's not as comfortable with it? Like, what is maybe an actionable piece of advice that you would give to be able to start down the path that you did, to be more open-minded, to be more open? Is there anything that you did that helped you to get started on that path?
It wouldn't have been by choice. Like I said, I went to that seminar with Breach Point, and then I had the episode where I start crying, and I had to look inward, like, why? How do I fix that? And that's when you start realizing all the stuff I'd been doing wrong. So, other than me just being able to tell my story as much as I can to anybody that'll listen so that they're not doing the same thing, but I'd also sit here and probably say that most people, guys like me, would agree with me, but they're not ready to look soft, or they want to continue to look hard and say, nope, I'm good, I can handle this, and don't worry about it. But just maybe people talking more about it would help it out a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I wanted to bring up a topic, and I'm curious on your experience with this because one of the pieces of advice that I hear all the time is this idea of work-life balance. And I think it kind of goes in that concept of like um, not letting your trash can overflow, having time away from the job that you can offload some of the things, prioritizing your family, having that like work life, not just balance, but also like disconnect. Um, what has your experience been with that? Because I think that it's a really tough topic. And it's easier said than done, saying like, hey, like when you're not at work, don't be at work. And when you're at home, be at home. And so what
Yeah.
has your experience been with that?
I'm a horrible example. I had no work-life balance. But to be positive, officers today do have work-life balance, so that's great. My history was I'm married. We've been married for 30 years. We've got 4 kids. Same mom, same dad, same household the entire time. But my wife stayed home to raise the kids, and I would work. And being a police officer, we don't get much money, right? And we're not getting rich. So I worked a lot. So I'd work a lot. So I would not be at home that often. But when I would get off work, and this was probably wrong, but when I'd get off work and I would go home, I never once talked to my wife about my job. Not once. Even to this day, I still don't talk to her about my job, but for different reasons today. I mean, I'm not keeping it from her today. It's just my job's not exciting, right? Um, back before when I was having fun, arresting people and stuff of that nature, I didn't want to talk about it to her because I didn't want her to worry about my job. I didn't want her to worry about me or the stuff that we were going through at our jobs. So I would never tell her anything that I'd done. Not because I was trying to be rude or mean about it, but in my mind, I was protecting her from knowing how crappy our jobs can be. So um, it was probably 5 years ago when I was at a class, I was teaching a class, and I brought a lady in, and her husband was a retired police officer. And she said her husband, he was a retired sergeant, he did the exact same thing. She said, for 20 years of our marriage, he never told me a single thing about his job. And I'm sitting like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do, right? And she started crying. She said, so 20 years I didn't know what he did. And for 20 years I worried and wondered in silence because I couldn't ask him. And I didn't realize how that would have affected my wife until then. So about 5 years ago, I will talk to my wife about work, but it's been so long she doesn't ask. So you know,
Um,
I would certainly change that. Make sure you keep your partner involved and included with what's going on. You don't have to get gory with the details, but them not knowing, they're not asking questions because they're being nosy or they're the media type of thing. They're asking because they care about how your day was at work. And when we talk about our day at work, that helps them come closer to us in a sense and feel like they're more part of our lives.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that, you know, ultimately we want to support home wellness, right? You want to make sure that when you do get to the end of this career, there's a home still intact if you can, and any advice and resources to create that stronger household, I think is appreciated, especially for younger officers who maybe have a new family or don't have a family yet. So I appreciate those words of wisdom. I wanted to maybe highlight some of the things that you guys are doing organizationally, and if there's anything that you've done to support wellness that you feel has been successful. And then on the flip side to it, I know that executive wellness is something that you're focused on too. So, how are you supporting wellness within your organization? What are some of the successes, maybe some of the challenges? And then what is your perspective on executive wellness?
So I don't necessarily know the success rate of what my department does. We've got, like I said, the We Never Walk Alone peer support
Yep.
group they can address. We pay for gym memberships for my department officers. We don't have a workout room. I'm a small agency. We don't have a gym, right? So we'll pay for that. Um, I'll send them to any classes that they want, but I specifically will target officer wellness classes and have them go. I'll assign the training to them, make them go. Again, they don't feel like it's forced because the trainings are good anyhow. And then, and just a very small token is I'll have them take a mental health. It's a completely anonymous mental health assessment. It's an online program. They have to take it. And then I give them a letter that has them say, to confirm that they've taken it, because I don't want to know the results. You can print off and, you can take a depression test, you can take a ADHD, you can take a PTSD test, but you take it all anonymously for yourself, right? I then have them sign an affidavit saying that they've taken it, just so that I know that I've forced them into at least a self-checkup, right? And if they need to seek help, they know that they can seek help, or they don't need to seek help, or whatever the case is. But at least it's an introduction. And I can't do anything more than that, but at least it puts it in their front sight for this short time that they're online in the program. So I can't say that it's successful, but I think that our program is successful. Next year, when I get sworn in as the president of the Illinois Chiefs, that's going to be one of my initiatives, is executive level mental health and peer support. So we're working with a company that is offering free peer support to every police leader in the state of Illinois, for their chiefs and their deputy chiefs or their top command staff. So we're currently making it available to statewide for any admin level officer or chief, I'm sorry. So we're going to push that out because, we, again, we have the same problems. I might not want to talk to a chief locally here because it may get spread out, right? It's a little more difficult, I feel, maybe as a chief, um, to find other chiefs, only because I don't want to say egos, but there's so much more self-doubt. You know, if I say that I'm struggling with passing of a child, that's an easy one to say, right? You can deal with. But if I say that, boy, I'm just depressed. I don't know what's wrong with me. You can't really tell somebody that, right? Unless you go to a psychiatrist or a doctor. You don't want to tell your friend's neighboring chief, I'm really depressed lately. I'll just be driving down the road and start crying for no reason. You don't, you can't find that, right? So hopefully this peer support, which is again anonymous, will encourage some police chiefs to pick up the phone and dial and say, man, I'm just struggling today. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it's gray out. Maybe I haven't got enough sun. Maybe it's just a lot of stress. But it gives them an opportunity to pick up the phone and talk to somebody else. So that'll be an initiative I'm pushing out.
And I think if the message within the organization is, hey, in order for you to feel your best, perform at your best, in order for you to effectively be able to do your job and take care of other people in your community, you have to first take care of yourself, then that same messaging has to also be for leadership. And I think that a lot of times, you know, we're really good at taking care of other people and then we forget about ourselves. And so I think if the message within the organization is that, then having resources for executive staff as well is important. And, you know, in order for you to be able to take care of everyone else, you also have to have the resources to be able to take care of yourself. And I know that there are other states that are doing something similar, not exactly the same, I don't think, but very similar in the sense of having, I think that it's not a separate company. They are, I think Colorado is doing it, maybe California, Washington. I think Washington is definitely doing it. And they're training all of their chiefs across the state to be like that peer support
Mhm.
so you can reach out. So similar
Right.
concept, but I think that the goal is the same. You know, how can we make sure that you guys also have resources that you need? I know that earlier we talked about how this job changes you. And maybe you don't realize it when you're younger in your career, what that looks like. I was hoping that maybe you could just give some insights into what are some of those changes to maybe look out for, or maybe some of like the early warning signs to look out for in behavior or, you know, shift in productivity or, you know, some of the things that you're seeing and how to identify that change.
The job really does change you. And I don't know that every job will change you. I don't feel like you take a retail job is going to change you, but being a firefighter, it's going to change you. Being a paramedic is going to change you. Doctor, the things will change you. When you're very first hired, and you're young, a young cop, or it used to be. It may be a little different nowadays, but you were running gunning, right? You wanted to go catch the criminals, and it was all black and white. If you had drugs, you go to jail, and you never, as a young cop, think about the compassion, or you don't think about, well, what was that person's upbringing type of stuff. Okay, you just like, I caught you with drugs, now you're going to jail. So then you've done the job for a little while and you're not that excited to take people to jail, and you slow down, and then you're handling calls, and now you go to a natural death call, and this is the 30th person you've seen dead, but you don't realize how callous you've become in your talk or in your speech when you're speaking to the family member. You come across cold, right? So when you're brand new, right, you are feeling super bad for the family member because you don't understand what they're going through, but you know that you're in an awkward position. But then when you get older, it's almost like you don't care and you just want to be a statue. That's not a good change, right? And I'm not just focusing on death, but focusing on death is the easy one to kind of point out. Um, you know, not that this makes any difference. I stopped a car yesterday, and the license plate suspended for no insurance, and her didn't have valid registration, no insurance, whatever the case was. And I didn't tow her car. I went up, I gave her a couple of tickets, and explained to her how to get out of the tickets, how to fix it, right? And I said, I'm not going to tow your car. And she starts crying. And then I said, I pushed your court date. You could have had a court date of June 10th, but I pushed it to July 8th. I said that way it gives you more time to get everything in order so you can get everything dropped and taken care of. She's crying again, and she's sobbing because she goes, you don't understand how much you've just helped a single mom trying to just get by, right? And so then she makes me want to cry, right? I don't cry, so I didn't cry on the stop, but it's just little things. The new guy might have just towed her car, which meant that she'd never have the money to get the car out of the impound. Then she'd lose all the money that she had for the car. So it just changes you in a whole different ways that you don't even really understand. And the bad thing, my father-in-law just passed away a month ago, right? And so I'm standing at his house, and my mother-in-law is, just completely losing it, and my wife is really upset, and there I am. I'm like, it's business as usual, that's a horrible thing to say, but to me, it was just a regular culture. It wasn't my father-in-law laying there dead. It was just some 80-year-old man lying on the ground. And so then I appear callous, and I am callous about that. So I mean, I don't want to say you get robbed of being able to grieve sometimes, but it changes you in ways that you don't understand. The way you look at people. You have these guys that are they'll say, oh, I can't sit with my back to the door. So they always have to watch yourself. One of the things, and I don't know, you get on edge a lot, right? You get startled really easy for some reason. If somebody stands by you, you jerk. I mean, maybe that happens a lot, but it seems like with police officers, they're on so much tension sometimes. So it changes in all kinds of ways, and it's upsetting because sometimes you've got these brand new 21-year-old recruits, and they don't know what they're in for, right? And then you see the guys that are retiring, they're all bitter and mad. It's like you went from this, super excited young recruit, and then your life has changed and you're not happy type of thing. So,
Well, there was two things that I thought about when you said this. So you've heard the saying, there's two things that cops don't like: change
change the status quo,
change in the way things are.
right?
And what you said actually like shifted my perspective a little bit. Change isn't always bad. Change can also be good. And so I think when we talk in the concept of change, a lot of times, and I just did this when I asked you the question, I'm like, it changes you, and we always kind of think in this context of like change is bad. But you reminded me when you just were talking that change can be really positive. You are changing to be more of a leader. You're learning how to, step into leadership roles. You're learning how to have more compassion and empathy for people and an understanding of what they're going through. But if you're not careful, is what it sounds like, over time, the overexposure of these things can harden you and kind of numb you to those situations, and maybe, worst case scenario, make you um, salty maybe about it. But how, I think the question is like, how can we get back to that positive aspect of change? How can we get back to that sense of
Yeah.
humanity and have that like excitement to learn and to grow and to make a positive impact in the community without it hardening you? And I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's the question of like, how can we go down the path of positive change?
Well, the most difficult part is the person has to be willing to change, right? Or they have to want to change, or they have to recognize that change is needed.
Mm-hmm.
And a quick different story. I had a new guy, right? This is probably 10 years ago. He changed the way that I dealt with my employees himself. All right, this great kid, and he would always ask questions, always ask me questions, and finally, I mean, I've never been the guy. I've never been the chief that says, because I said so, and like point to your badge, right? I've never, but this kid was pushing me right up to that point where I'm like, just effing do it, Seth. And he stopped me. He says, Chief, listen, I'm not asking questions because I doubt what you want. I ask questions to help me understand what you want, and that helps me do what you want better.
Mm.
I'm like, oh, so that really changed my perspective on these newer guys, right?
Yeah.
They learn in a different manner, and they're not trying to be disrespectful or question the authority or question the whys. They're questioning it so that they understand it differently. And so that's a moment in my career that I accepted change. You can just beat your head on the wall so much before you have to say we're doing something different, right?
Yeah.
Seth, he was beating me up mentally because everything I asked him to do, he'd question it. And so finally, I just gave up. And when he said that to me, I'm like, wow, now that makes sense. And I never got mad at him again for asking questions. But what I did do is when I would ask him to do something or give him an assignment, I would lead up the why I want this done
Yep.
before I even tell him, and then he didn't have to ask the question. So him explaining it to me helped me change my uh, approach on how we got stuff done. So, like I said, you have to be willing to change.
I love that story. And I think it just goes back to what we had talked about in the beginning of like the importance and the power of conversations and communication, because oftentimes, like, if you're not talking about it, you don't know what's going on, and the fact that you guys were able to effectively communicate and understand that there's a different learning process, going on. You're like, oh, that makes sense. And now you're able to communicate more effectively in a way that they're going to understand. And I do think that the younger generation is really interested in why. And I think that if you can understand the why, then the what and the how becomes easier. So I love that story. And I think that it just goes back to like the power of communication, and how can you communicate in a way that's well received on both ends. I do have one final question for you. What words of wisdom would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way.
I'd probably say slow down, right? Um, and just kind of realize, don't ever lose your compassion. Um, um, your job's going to change you, but don't let it change you. If once you get changed, recognize it and be able to correct it. If like what you said earlier, if you get too salty, right? Recognize it. Find you a great core support system. With your significant others. Make sure you share information when you talk to them, right? Find a good friend or friends that you can talk to. Don't bottle everything up. Bottling up is just it's not a good thing, and you're gonna get involved in some critical incidents. And make sure you talk. Take advantage of all the help they can give you. Don't you don't have to be the old macho man and like just suck it up and move on. It's going to come back to bite you in the ass if you do just not talk about these things. Talk about it's okay. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be confused, but that's where the talking to the others is going to help you. So you need to find a good core support system and stick with it. The other thing I would say is don't let the health get away from you. A lot of guys here they say you stay fit so you don't have to get fit, right? So when they go to the gym, they're going to the gym to stay fit so they don't have to get fit. So make sure you have some sort of exercise diet and exercise program so that you don't find yourself 15 years from now out of shape and struggling to get in and out of a squad car type of deal. So find a great support system, be able to talk to the people that you can, and take care of yourself. Put yourself first because your health is what matters most, because if you can't do your job because of your health, then you can't help anybody out there.
Love it. Thank you, Chief Ryan. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. Um, yeah, I thought it was great, honestly.
Well, thanks for having me. I don't know that we've done anything or solved anything, but hopefully somebody will find some benefit out of this, and it'll be a good thing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks.